I grew up watching Star Wars. Well, the first 6 films anyway. I did watch The Force Awakens, but I barely remember it now. I didn't really like it at the time, and it's the last one that I've seen. But in this video, I'm going to be discussing Star Wars, the original, or Star Wars A New Hope as it came to be called. That's where it all started, and it was the first one that I saw, even though I think The Phantom Menace was already out at that point. In preparation for this video, I rewatched the first 6 films again, and yes, I'm from the generation that actually likes the prequels.
Brave, but foolish, my old Jedi friend.
Despite all their flaws and cringe-worthy dialogue, I still love them, and the last half of Revenge of the Sith is some of the best of Star Wars. I hadn't rewatched any of them in a while, so revisiting them brought back a lot of nostalgia. Star Wars Episode 4 changed cinema, and the sci-fi genre as a whole. Its characters are so ingrained in popular culture that it's hard to find anyone who doesn't know Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker. The young George Lucas, inspired by the space adventure comics of Flash Gordon, first had an idea for a space opera in 1971. He began writing his treatment in 1973, which took inspiration from Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress. Lucas wanted to combine space and fantasy, and he succeeded. We ended up with a film set in space, with knights, wizards, and a princess. The film itself has quite a simple story when you think about it. The White Knight goes off to save the princess from the Black Knight's fortress, with the help of an old wizard. It's something that's been seen in fiction many times, but Lucas managed to put a new spin on it. With a modest budget of $11 million, Star Wars finally got made. Many of the cast members thought it would end up being a disaster, but when the film was released in 1977, it took the world by storm. It still remains one of the most financially successful films of all time, and adjusted for inflation, it's the 4th highest grossing film ever made. The film opens with the iconic shot underneath the Rebel spaceship that has the audience thinking, wow, that ship looks big, and then we see the massive Imperial Star Destroyer. I really love the practical effects in the originals. I can only imagine the time and effort that went into making all the ships, as well as the Death Star, and it really pays off. The aliens, on the other hand, not so much. They can be a bit hit or miss, especially in the cantina scene. We're so used to seeing Chewbacca now, but I wonder if the film released now, what would audiences think, seeing a man in a big hairy suit screaming on screen? The Rebel Alliance is at war with the Empire, and the Rebel ship has stolen schematics for the Death Star and is trying to escape them, but they are intercepted by Imperial forces. It's here we are first introduced to C-3PO and R2-D2, 2 droids who act as the comic relief characters. They are a little silly, but they've ended up being fan favourites. Princess Leia, with her iconic hair, hides the plans with R2-D2, and the droids escape in an escape pod. I know this has been talked about 100 times, but if the gunman on the Star Destroyer had destroyed the escape pod, then the whole film wouldn't have happened.
If the gunner had shot the pod that C-3PO and R2 were in, none of it would have happened.
Then we get one of the best character introductions in all of cinema. The film uses every trick in the book to make Darth Vader seem more villainous. He appears in a cloud of smoke, walking past a load of dead bodies. He towers above the stormtroopers, and is dressed all in black, and wears a mask that hides his face. He's even able to pick up one of the rebels by the neck and chuck him with ease. I'm glad that they decided to go with James Earl Jones's voice, rather than the actor who plays Darth Vader, David Prowse, as he doesn't have the most intimidating voice.
Find the passengers of this vessel! I want them alive!
The droids crash land on Tatooine and end up in the service of Luke Skywalker. I've seen some people say they don't like Luke Skywalker, saying he's annoying or whiny, but I still like a coming-of-age story, especially one where the farm boy leaves to go on a quest. I know it's been done loads of times, but I still like it. Luke also follows the hero's journey pretty closely, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. At the start we see him unhappy with his ordinary life, and he wants to leave Tatooine. I love the music as he's looking out into the binary sunset, and you can feel his sense of adventure, but he's stuck having to work on his uncle's farm. John Williams' music in all of the 6 films really is great, it's some of his best work, and really does bring the films together. Luke wants to go and join the Academy, which I can only assume is the Imperial Academy, so does that mean if the droids didn't land on Tatooine, Luke would have ended up in the Empire? Luckily he discovers Leia's message, that she hid in R2-D2. Leia needs the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's going under the name Ben Kenobi. In hindsight that doesn't seem a very good disguise. It seems a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger, going into hiding as John Schwarzenegger. We don't see any other Kenobis, so I have no idea how common the name is, but Luke made the connection straight away. Luke goes off to find Ben, played by Alec Guinness. I really like Obi-Wan Kenobi. I love mentor characters, especially the wise old wizards, which is what he basically is. Luke tells Obi-Wan about the message, and we find out that he knew Luke's father, and that Darth Vader killed Luke's father.
Right.
I don't know if George Lucas had it all planned out at that point, or if he decided to change the plot when he was writing Empire Strikes Back. If it was already planned out, I'm not sure why he wouldn't just tell Luke. Obi-Wan offers to teach Luke the ways of the Force like his father, but Luke refuses the call. That is until he finds out his aunt and uncle have been murdered by stormtroopers. Luke then wants to become a Jedi like his father, and his aunt and uncle are never mentioned again. I guess he got over it pretty quick. They then go to Mos Eisley Spaceport to try and get a ship to Alderaan. It's here we see some of the first changes that George Lucas made to the originals. The changes vary in quality. I don't like all the extra creatures he added to the scenes. I mean, I get he wanted to make it feel more alive, but they just seem distracting. Not to mention that the CGI isn't that good either. Overall, most of the changes don't really bother me. There are a few that are particularly bad, like the whole Greedo shooting first thing, and also Han Solo meeting Jabba straight away. There's that weird part where he steps over his tail, and it just looks awkward. But the only change that's unforgivable for me is adding Darth Vader saying no in Return of the Jedi before he saves Luke. The silence was perfect before. In Mos Eisley, we see our first use of the Force, and a lightsaber in action, as Obi-Wan uses a Jedi mind trick on the stormtroopers to force them into letting them pass. And he also saves Luke from that weird alien at the bar. They enlist the help of Han Solo, for a price that is, and he takes them to his ship, the Millennium Falcon. It's funny how both Harrison Ford and Alec Guinness seem to dislike Star Wars. Someone asked Harrison Ford who shot first, and he replied he really doesn't care. Nevertheless, I still like Han Solo. He's a great character, initially only motivated by self-interest, and he has a great character arc in the film, putting aside his selfish ways to help fight the Empire in the end. Luke and Obi-Wan plan to go to Alderaan. On their way there, we see Luke training, and we get little glimpses about what the Force actually is. Before they can reach Alderaan, it is destroyed by the Death Star. Grand Moff Tarkin, played by Peter Cushing, is behind the attack, and doesn't he just look so cool? He also seems to outrank Darth Vader, ordering Vader about.
Enough of this.
Vader, release him.
As you wish.
Also, for some reason in this scene, Leia has a British accent.
I recognised your foul stench when I was brought on board.
When Luke, Han and Obi-Wan arrive at the spot where Alderaan used to be, they get trapped in a tractor beam and are forced onto the Death Star. The scenes on the Death Star are some of my favourite in the film, and they are forced to sneak about the Death Star in order to rescue Leia and disable the tractor beam so they're able to take off again. But before they can leave, there is a confrontation between Darth Vader and his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And yeah, the fight scene does look particularly dated, especially compared to the prequels, but I can appreciate that it's an older film. Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan, and Luke, Leia and Han flee the Death Star. At this point, Han is still only interested in his reward for rescuing the princess. With the plans now in the hands of the rebels, they launch an attack on the Death Star, targeting its only weakness. Luke puts into practice all that Obi-Wan has taught him. It's up to him and a small band of fighters to take on the mighty Death Star. Han has refused to help, and Luke is guided by the spirit of Obi-Wan, who helps him during the fight. It isn't long before each of the other fighters is taken out, one by one, until it's only Luke left. He trusts in the Force, and manages to succeed at the last moment, but it wouldn't have been possible without the help of Han, who redeems himself by showing up to help. The Death Star is destroyed, and the pair end up getting medals from the princess. Chewbacca is left out for some reason, and the film ends. It's a nice self-contained story, as well as part of a trilogy. I feel like a lot of new films that want to set up a larger universe forget that the first film needs to be good on its own. While the film may have a simple story, and Luke may be your standard hero on his journey, I don't think that takes away from the film. Star Wars manages to put a new spin on things, by combining fantasy and sci-fi to create a great story. It begins one of the biggest franchises in popular culture, one that I grew up watching, and while I personally prefer Lord of the Rings over Star Wars, the original 6 films are great fantasy adventure films, and are full of nostalgia for me. So for my rating, I'd give Star Wars A New Hope 7 out of 10. After the enormous success of Star Wars A New Hope in 1977, George Lucas had the difficult task of following it up, and somehow, The Empire Strikes Back ended up being what most people would consider the best Star Wars film ever, even surpassing the original. The film was directed by Irvin Kershner instead of George Lucas this time, due to the stress Lucas had on the first film. The screenplay was adapted from George Lucas's story by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. Lee was initially hired to write the sequel, but unfortunately died in 1978. Lucas then wrote the next draft, before hiring Kasdan. The film was originally given a budget of $8 million, but after multiple production issues, it ballooned to $30.5 million. After much anticipation and almost 3 years after the original, The Empire Strikes Back released on the 21st of May 1980, and it was met with critical acclaim. The Empire Strikes Back picks up 3 years after the events of A New Hope. What I like about A New Hope is that it technically could stand on its own. The effects of the destruction of the Death Star are left unclear in the film's ending, and you could assume that the rebels had won, but as we pick up 3 years later, it seems the Empire is still in control, and the destruction of the Death Star caused minimal damage to the Empire. Darth Vader has dispatched probe droids to find the Rebel Alliance. A probe droid discovers the base on the ice planet Hoth, and the Empire launches an attack. Luke, Han and Leia are on the planet with Chewbacca, C-3PO and R2-D2. Luke goes to investigate the probe crash site, but before he can get there, he is attacked and captured by a Wampa. He's hung up in a cave, and the cave scene is great. We see our first real use of the Force. So far, we've heard that the Force is an energy field, and we've seen it used to help Luke aim and detect blast hits, but now this is the first time we've seen it used to control objects. He uses the Force to get his lightsaber, that's just out of reach, and he escapes the Wampa. Luke wanders the ice field, nearly dying from hypothermia, when he sees a vision of Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan tells him to go to the Dagobah system to learn from the Jedi Master Yoda. Luckily, Han is able to rescue Luke, and in a really gross scene, he uses a dead Tauntaun to keep him warm. The Empire's invasion begins, and we see the Battle of Hoth. This is one of my favourite battles. I like the ones in space, but battles on the planet's surface just always feels like they have higher stakes for me. The Empire uses AT-ATs, all those giant robot camel things. In universe, I'm not sure how practical AT-ATs are. The use of stop motion here really gives them a great mechanical look, and the backgrounds are actually matte paintings. We again see a great use of practical effects that I think have aged very well. After the invading Imperial forces reach the base, the trio is forced to split up. Luke heads off to find Master Yoda on Dagobah, and Han and Leia escape Hoth in the Millennium Falcon. It seems like a brave decision to split the trio up, especially after the success of the first film. It must have been tempting to keep them all together, but splitting them up creates a much tenser story. Darth Vader's goal in the film is to capture the Millennium Falcon, firstly as it helped to destroy the Death Star, and secondly to capture Luke by using Han and Leia as bait. After the escape from Hoth, Han and Leia hide in an asteroid field as they attempt to evade Imperial forces. We see Leia and Han become closer, despite all the tension going on. They seek refuge in Cloud City on the planet Bespin. The city is governed by Han's old friend, Lando Calrissian, played by Billy D. Williams. Vader, meanwhile, has hired bounty hunters to track them down, including Boba Fett. Lando betrays Han and Leia, leading them into a trap, and in this scene, Darth Vader has one of the coolest lines in the trilogy.
We would be honoured if you would join us.
While that's happening, Luke reaches Dagobah. He crash lands in a strange swamp, and meets a strange little creature who turns out to be Master Yoda. The scene where Luke first meets Yoda, and Yoda's chucking all his things about, always makes me laugh. It's so funny that this is the head of the Jedi. Yoda and the spirit of Obi-Wan disgust Luke, and Yoda reluctantly accepts him as his apprentice. The training scenes are great as well, as we see Yoda training Luke, and Luke struggling to control his anger and impulsiveness. As part of his training, Luke battles a strange apparition in the form of Darth Vader. Luke cuts off Vader's head and his own face appears in the helmet. I actually like these scenes, and they feel strange and almost dreamlike, but I've always wondered what it actually means. My interpretation is that it's a warning to Luke, that if he goes down the same path as his father, by not controlling his anger, he'll end up just like Darth Vader. Also, Yoda lifting the X-Wing out of the swamp is such a great scene, as we see this little old Jedi is so powerful with the Force. It's here that Luke senses Han and Leia are in danger, and he goes off to Bespin, against the wishes of Yoda. As he's leaving, Obi-Wan says, "That boy is our last hope," and Yoda replies, "No, there is another." I can only imagine what it would have been like, having to wait 3 years to see the next film, and find out what he meant. Vader has Han tortured, causing Luke to sense he's in danger. Vader then has Han frozen in carbonite, but not before Leia tells Han she loves him, and Han replies, "I know." I love that line, it just sums up his character. Also, Lando redeems himself and rescues Leia, Chewbacca and C-3PO. But they're too late to save Han, who's been taken by Boba Fett, who plans to collect the bounty from Jabba the Hutt. Luke arrives on Cloud City for one of the best confrontations in the series. He and Vader fight, but we see Vader easily blocks his attacks. He's almost toying with him, and we can see the vast skill difference between them and how unprepared Luke was. It culminates with Vader cutting Luke's arm off, and with one of the best twists in cinema, Vader tells Luke that he is his father. Apparently during the filming, the actor said a different line, so that the twist wouldn't be leaked. I've heard that they said Obi-Wan killed his father, and the line was later dubbed over in post-production. The fake twist was then leaked to a newspaper, and the true secret, that was only known by a select few, went on to become one of the best twists in all of cinema. Luke is horrified. He jumps off the ledge, and he can't have had any way of knowing that he'd actually survive. So was he actually planning to end it there? But he somehow survives, and is rescued by Lando and Leia. He gets a new hand and the film ends there. What a cliffhanger to end it on. And imagine having to wait 3 years for the next film. Han's been captured, Luke is Vader's son, and we've heard that there's another hope out there. Empire Strikes Back is not only a great Star Wars film, but a great film in general. It expands upon the first film, and even surpasses it. The impact it's had on cinema, and on sci-fi as a whole is massive. I feel like almost everyone knows the twist at this point, even if you haven't seen the film. The film is referenced all over the place, from Marvel to Toy Story. It's such a fantastic film, and John Williams returns with a great score. This film also had the least amount of changes compared to the others. I'm not sure about changing Boba Fett's voice. I know it's established in the prequels that he's a clone, but it doesn't sit right with me replacing an actor's work, years and years after the film's release, and removing him from the film. But overall the film is great, and after rewatching it, I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. We now come to the conclusion of the original trilogy. So, does it live up to the previous two? And does it have a satisfying conclusion? It's complicated. After a 3-year wait, Return of the Jedi released in 1983. It was directed by Richard Marquand, with the screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas. Lucas again didn't want to direct, and Empire Strikes Back director Irvin Kershner also declined, due to spending 2 years on the previous film. Steven Spielberg, David Lynch, and David Cronenberg were all considered, but Richard Marquand was chosen. However, Lucas kept a strong presence on set, due to Marquand's inexperience with special effects. Marquand joked that it's rather like trying to direct King Lear with Shakespeare in the next room. The film picks up with the rescuing of Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt. Han Solo was originally not in the script, as Harrison Ford was only contracted for 2 films. He also didn't like Star Wars, and Lucas didn't expect he would return. His character had been frozen in carbonite, so that his character could be left there if Ford declined to return, but luckily he decided that he would return. Luke and Leia go to rescue Han Solo, and we see Luke Skywalker is now much more confident. He's wearing black Jedi robes, and he's completely calm and confident, but he and Leia are captured. Jabba wants to feed Luke to the Sarlacc pit, but luckily Luke has a plan to escape. Lando Calrissian is among Jabba's people, and R2-D2 has Luke's new lightsaber, which is now green. Luke manages to escape and rescue the temporarily blinded Han Solo. Leia kills Jabba, and his barge is destroyed. Boba Fett is also killed, and I never got the hype around this character. People seem to love him, but he's barely in either of the films, and I never really got why he was so liked. Luke, Han and Leia are reunited, but only briefly, before Luke plans on returning to Dagobah. We learn that the Empire is constructing a second Death Star, but this time it's protected by a shield, with the generator on the nearby moon of Endor. Luke heads back to Dagobah to see Yoda. Yoda was also not supposed to return, but Marquand wanted to resolve Luke's dilemma at the end of the last film about going to rescue Han and Leia and finishing his training. Also, a line was added to have Yoda confirm what Vader said about being Luke's father. George Lucas had consulted a child psychologist, and he didn't want younger moviegoers to dismiss Vader's claim about being Luke's father as a lie. Luke returns to Dagobah to complete his training with Yoda, and Yoda dies. Obi-Wan's spirit tells Luke that Leia is his sister. This is where we learn what the line, "There is another," means from the last film. And yes, that makes these scenes a lot weirder.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force.
I don't know if they had it all planned out in the previous film or not, because I'm not sure why you'd have those scenes if they did. Obi-Wan tells Luke that in order to complete his training, Luke must face Vader again. Luke, Han and Leia head to Endor to destroy the shield generator, protecting the second Death Star. They are captured by Ewoks, and I'm not the biggest fan of the Ewoks. Apparently they were originally supposed to be Wookiees, and I think that would have worked a lot better, to be honest. After they befriend the Ewoks, Luke tells Leia that she's his sister, and she says that she's always known. Now I know that this line gets talked about a lot, as it makes things even stranger, but I think she means she's always known through a kind of Force connection, rather than literally known. Luke then surrenders to Imperial forces, so that he's brought before Darth Vader. He tries to convince his father that there's still a good man in him, but initially he fails. Vader brings Luke before the Emperor, and these parts are the best in the film. All the scenes between the Emperor, Vader and Luke are great, especially compared to the Ewok scenes. But the Emperor reveals that the Death Star is in fact fully operational, and he begins firing on the Rebel fleet. The Emperor attempts to get Luke to succumb to his anger and turn to the dark side. Meanwhile, Han is captured by Imperial forces, where the Ewoks launch an attack. The Battle of Endor is pretty cool, but it's not as good as Hoth. The Ewoks really take away from the seriousness for me. They manage to destroy the shield generator, allowing Lando to attack the Death Star. Luke battles Darth Vader again, this time almost beating him. This is great as it shows how much training he's done and how his character is developed. This time he cuts off Vader's hand, and I love when he sees Vader's prosthetic hand, and it's just like his own. He throws down his lightsaber, not wanting to become like his father. Enraged, the Emperor plans to kill Luke. He tortures him with Force lightning. And now we come to the worst change that George Lucas made. As Luke is being tortured, Vader shouts "No" before stopping the Emperor. The silence before was perfect, and I can't stand this change. While a lot of the others annoy me, they don't bother me nearly as much as this. Vader chucks the Emperor off the side, redeeming himself, but the lightning fatally wounds him, and before he dies, he asks Luke to take off his mask so that he can see his son with his own eyes. This is one of my favourite scenes in the film, as the two look at each other face to face for the first time, before Vader dies. Luke then escapes the Death Star before it's destroyed. The changes made to the ending are actually some of the positive changes George Lucas made. Adding in new scenes from around the other planets actually adds to the ending, and I much prefer the new music. Luke burns his father's body on a pyre, and is reunited with Han and Leia for the celebrations, and the film ends. Overall, I'd say the film ends satisfyingly, with great scenes between Vader, Luke and the Emperor. I'm not a fan of the Ewoks as I've said, but I still enjoy the Battle of Endor, and I like the ending celebrations as well. Much like the changes to Boba Fett's voice, I'm also not sure about adding Hayden Christensen into the original. I mean, I get why they did it, but it doesn't sit right with me. Removing an actor from his work all those years later just feels wrong. So for my rating, I'd give the film 6.5 out of 10. It's not my favourite, but there are some good moments, and it has a satisfying ending to the trilogy. So that's all the original films reviewed. Of those three, Empire Strikes Back is my favourite, followed by A New Hope, and then Return of the Jedi. I liked all of them, and together they form a great trilogy, with a satisfying beginning, middle and end. After a 16-year wait, Star Wars returned to our screens, and it was met with some mixed responses. With its wooden dialogue and controversial comic relief character, Star Wars The Phantom Menace is definitely the weakest of the prequels. However, I'm one of the people that actually like the prequels. In 1999, Star Wars The Phantom Menace released. It was written and directed by George Lucas, and unlike the first films that featured mostly unknown actors, The Phantom Menace featured a star-studded cast, including Samuel L. Jackson, Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, and with Ian McDiarmid, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker and Frank Oz all returning. Things were looking good. Audiences would finally get to see Star Wars, with its lightsaber duels and space battles, with modern CGI. Unfortunately, that's not really what we got. The film takes place 32 years before the events of Star Wars, and follows the young Anakin Skywalker, along with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Here is where I think they made their first mistake. I think they went too far back in time, and instead should have had Anakin about the same age as Luke Skywalker. This isn't really a criticism of Jake Lloyd, as he played the young Anakin about as well as anyone could. I just think it would have been better with an older Anakin. The second issue I have is adding Qui-Gon Jinn. The story could have been more streamlined if they had focused on Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's also established in the originals that Yoda is Obi-Wan's master, so I'm not really sure why George decided to add in this additional character. The film starts off with a trade conflict, and for a film aimed at younger viewers, trade embargoes and the inner workings of the Galactic Republic might be a little complicated. Chancellor Valorum, played by Terence Stamp, sends off Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to deal with the Trade Federation. The Trade Federation has been blockading the planet of Naboo. They're secretly under the orders of the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. I'm glad they got Ian McDiarmid back. I love his over-the-top acting, it's hilarious. He orders the Separatists to kill the Jedi, which forces them to flee to Naboo. I do like Liam Neeson's portrayal as Qui-Gon Jinn, despite thinking that his character is unnecessary. Ewan McGregor does a good job as Obi-Wan, but again I would have liked to have seen an older Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan is still learning from his master, but his training is coming to an end. On Naboo, we get introduced to Jar Jar, probably one of the most controversial Star Wars characters. And yeah, I like him. I know I might be in the minority here, but I actually think he's kind of funny. I know this may come as a bit of a shock, considering I hated the Ewoks, but I don't know, I think he's kind of funny. Jar Jar is a Gungan, and he guides the two Jedi to his home, to get help from the Gungan leader. The CGI in this film is pretty mixed. Sometimes it looks really good, and then other times it looks awful, particularly in the Gungan battle at the end. I think it's the over-reliance on CGI, compared to something like Lord of the Rings, that makes it not hold up as well. The Jedi then go to the capital of Naboo with Jar Jar and meet Queen Amidala. They help her escape and attempt to go to Coruscant, the capital of the Republic. At this point in the film we meet an old friend, R2-D2. I do think the droids seem to have been added clumsily to the prequels, and they're not really that relevant to the overall plot. Their ship is damaged while passing through the blockade, and they are forced to stop off on Tatooine. It's here we first meet the 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker, who will one day grow up to become Darth Vader. The film shows his engineering skills, as he builds C-3PO to help his mother. They are both slaves. Qui-Gon Jinn senses the Force is with Anakin, and tests him. This is where midichlorians are introduced, and I never understood the hate that this got. Did people before just think the Force was magic or something? I'm not sure why the midichlorians ruin it for some people. For me, they never really annoyed me. Let me know in the comments what you think of them. Qui-Gon finds that Anakin has a midichlorian count higher than even Master Yoda, and he believes that Anakin is the chosen one. Qui-Gon wants to free Anakin, and arranges a deal where if Anakin wins his pod race, he will be free, but Qui-Gon is unable to free Anakin's mother. Anakin wins his pod race and says goodbye to his mother, but on the way to the ship, he, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are attacked by Darth Maul, the apprentice of Darth Sidious. This marks the first appearance of a Sith for a millennium. We get our first glimpse at a lightsaber duel, but it doesn't last long, and the Jedi and their entourage escape. They go to Coruscant, and something good about this film is that the world feels more alive. In the originals, the galaxy seemed somewhat empty. and the planets we go to feel very isolated. With Coruscant and Naboo, they both feel really alive, with the more up-to-date CGI. Qui-Gon goes to the Jedi Council and wants to train Anakin, but the Council refuses. Qui-Gon says that he will train the boy himself, even if the Council refuses. Meanwhile, we are also introduced to Senator Palpatine, who is really Darth Sidious. He has orchestrated the whole thing, so that there will be a vote of no confidence, and he will get elected Chancellor. As the film draws to its climax, the film splits into 4 different plot lines. We have the Battle of Naboo with Jar Jar, and some really poor CGI. We have Anakin flying the ship by accident into the blockade. We also have Queen Padme Amidala leading the search for Viceroy Gunray. And lastly, the lightsaber duel between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan and Maul. I think it was a mistake to have so many diverging plot lines. Again, if it was the conclusion of a trilogy, then I'd understand. But did we really need to see Anakin flying off accidentally with autopilot? Again, I think it would have been stronger if it was more focused, especially just on Obi-Wan and Anakin. The duel itself is great. It really steps up from the originals, and with John Williams' Duel of the Fates playing in the background, it really is such a great fight. Tragically, Qui-Gon Jinn dies, but Obi-Wan manages to defeat Darth Maul. Before Qui-Gon dies, he asks Obi-Wan to train Anakin. The droid army is defeated when Anakin inadvertently destroys the blockade. There is a celebration on Naboo, but all doesn't seem well, as Yoda wonders if there is another Sith out there, as there are always 2, a master and an apprentice. Then the film ends. Overall, The Phantom Menace is a mixed bag. It's got some great music, a great fight scene, some cool characters, yet the acting and dialogue can sometimes feel a little wooden. The plot also seems a mess, and could have been streamlined for better character moments. I'd give the film a 5 out of 10. It's an average film, but I can see why some people hate it. I don't hate it and I don't love it, it's just average. This film had so much potential. We're now dealing with a slightly older Anakin, as he trains with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we see the first flickers of his darker nature. But Star Wars Attack of the Clones is another mixed film. There are some great elements here, but a lot of wasted potential. Star Wars Attack of the Clones, released in 2002, and picks up 10 years after the events of the first film. A separatist movement has risen in the Galactic Republic, led by Count Dooku, played by Christopher Lee. The film follows Anakin Skywalker, under his master Obi-Wan Kenobi, as they are tasked with protecting Padme Amidala. An attempt is made on Padme's life, and Anakin and Obi-Wan chase after the changeling responsible. Almost every line in this film has become a meme.
Impossible. Perhaps the archives are incomplete.
I hate it when he does that.
So it's hard to judge it now. But I like these early sections, with the chase through the city, and tracking the changeling through the bar. I would have liked to have seen more scenes with Anakin and Obi-Wan, and there's actually surprisingly few in the film. Padme returns to the Senate. She's there to vote on giving the Republic an army, in order to deal with the growing separatist threat. Chancellor Palpatine is of course secretly behind the separatist movement, and he seeks the army for his own gain. I like all the political manoeuvring in the prequels, and I would have liked to have seen them expanded. They're some of the best elements of the prequels. Instead, this film is more of a romance story between Padme and Anakin. They are separated from Obi-Wan, who goes off in search of the bounty hunter that hired the changeling. The romance sections are some of my least favourite. The dialogue is again a little wooden. If they had just tweaked it a little bit, it could have been good. For example, the "I don't like sand" line actually makes a lot of sense, when you consider it probably reminds Anakin of being a slave on Tatooine. But the way it is in the film just comes off as awkward. The pair are on Naboo, and they start developing feelings for each other. There's a rule that the Jedi aren't supposed to form attachments with people. I feel like this wasn't in the original, and was never mentioned before the prequels. I like the plotline of Obi-Wan going to Kamino to find the bounty hunter. We meet the bounty hunter Jango Fett, Boba Fett's father, and Obi-Wan discovers that a massive clone army is being put together for the Republic. The order was allegedly placed by Master Cypher Dyas, who is now deceased. I would have liked to have seen this section fleshed out a little more as well, as the setting feels unique, and I find it really interesting. Obi-Wan gets into a fight with Jango Fett, who escapes. but Obi-Wan puts a tracker on his ship and is able to follow him. The fight through the asteroid field is pretty cool, and it has one of the most satisfying sound effects in all of Star Wars.
Seismic charges.
Obi-Wan follows Jango Fett to Geonosis. Meanwhile, Anakin starts getting trouble in visions about his mother in pain, and he and Padme go to Tatooine. He finds that his mother has been freed, and that she married Klieg Lars. Klieg says that Tusken Raiders took Anakin's mother around a month ago, and he assumes that she's dead. Nevertheless, Anakin goes to rescue her, but he's too late. She sees him one last time before dying. Anakin then massacres the Tusken Raiders, and we see the first glimpses of his dark side. Back on Geonosis, we finally meet Count Dooku, and he feels criminally underused in this film. I get that they wanted a long build-up, and that does make his reveal more impactful, but I would have preferred some more scenes with him. Dooku tells Obi-Wan that the Republic is under the control of Darth Sidious, but Obi-Wan doesn't believe him. He offers Obi-Wan the chance to join him, but Obi-Wan refuses. Christopher Lee is always getting rejected.
We must join with him, Gundam. You must join me, Obi-Wan.
Jar Jar has limited screen time in this film, after the polarising reception his character got in the last film. However, don't worry. He turns up to propose a vote to give emergency powers to Chancellor Palpatine. This allows Palpatine to mobilise the clone army for the Republic. See, all of these elements to do with the political side are the ones that are most interesting to me. I would have liked them to focus more on that. Anakin and Padme attempt to rescue Obi-Wan, but they are captured. They are led out to an arena and have to battle strange alien creatures. John Williams' Across the Stars is one of his best Star Wars soundtracks, and it plays as they enter the arena. Mace Windu arrives with his purple lightsaber that Samuel L. Jackson got by just asking George Lucas for it. A battalion of clones, along with many other Jedi, arrive at the arena and there's a battle. This is the first time we've seen a large battle with lots of Jedi, and it does look pretty cool, but it feels rushed. They just appear, and before you know it, the battle is over. The same goes for the fight with Count Dooku. Anakin runs at him and gets his hand cut off. Obi-Wan is also easily defeated. I get why George Lucas made this decision, as it shows how much stronger Count Dooku is. Again, it just feels a little rushed. Yoda arrives and fights Count Dooku. For someone who uses a cane, he sure can move pretty well. Dooku manages to escape. The film ends with Anakin marrying Padme in secret. Star Wars Attack of the Clones is another mixed film. Again, it had a lot of potential, but it wasted it, focusing too heavily on the romance sections, and less on the political manoeuvring of Palpatine. It also should have focused more on the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin. We see there is tension between the two of them, as Anakin feels he's being held back, but it isn't really fleshed out. The sections with Count Dooku also could have done with some extra scenes. He's such an interesting character, a former Jedi who grew disillusioned with them, and started a separatist movement. I'm also confused as to what he wants. He tells Obi-Wan that they can join together and destroy the Sith, yet he has grown disillusioned with both the Jedi and the Republic, so it's unclear what his ideal system would look like. The fight scenes in this film are also considerably worse than The Phantom Menace, and as I've said, they felt rushed. I do like the scenes where Anakin returns home to Tatooine, and we see the first flickers of his dark side. The performances are generally okay, despite the wooden acting at times. Anakin can come across as whiny, but I suppose that's how his character is supposed to be at the time, with him becoming more frustrated with Obi-Wan. I did prefer this film to The Phantom Menace, but it's only slightly better. I'd rate it 5.5 out of 10. Now we come to the conclusion of the prequel trilogy, and unlike the previous two, Star Wars Revenge of the Sith is actually a good film. Released in 2005, Star Wars Revenge of the Sith picks up straight into the action. It takes place 3 years after the events of the previous film. Chancellor Palpatine has been taken prisoner by the Separatists, led by Count Dooku and General Grievous. We get a cool space battle scene above Coruscant, as Obi-Wan and Anakin attempt to rescue Palpatine, and straight away you can tell the CGI is improved, especially compared to the last film. It's also surprisingly funny in parts, especially with the back and forth between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin. When they reach the Chancellor, Count Dooku is there, and the pair have to face off against him once again. Obi-Wan gets taken out again, but we see that Anakin has much improved since their last face-off. He is able to defeat Count Dooku. While Obi-Wan is still knocked out, Chancellor Palpatine encourages Anakin to kill Dooku, despite him being defenceless and defeated. Anakin kills him, but instantly regrets it. Palpatine tells him that it was revenge, and we find out that Anakin has confided in him what happened with the Sun People. I would have liked to have seen some more scenes between these two, especially showing Palpatine slowly manipulating him. It is shown in the film, but it's all done very quickly. Palpatine and Anakin escape with Obi-Wan, and crash land the ship onto Coruscant. Grievous escapes, with Obi-Wan having to hunt him down. Anakin meets Padme, and she tells him she is pregnant. Anakin again has troubling visions, but this time of Padme dying in childbirth. This sets up his need to stop her from dying, and his fear of losing her, just like he lost his mother. Chancellor Palpatine appoints Anakin as his representative on the Jedi Council. However, the Council have grown distrustful of Palpatine. They allow Anakin onto the Council, but don't grant him the rank of Master. This further causes division between Anakin and the Jedi, and he again believes that he's been held back. The Council ask Anakin to spy on the Chancellor, sowing further doubt into Anakin's mind about the Jedi. Before Obi-Wan goes on his hunt for Grievous, he sees Anakin for one last time, before everything goes wrong. Anakin thanks him for his training, and says, "May the Force be with you." I really like this little moment, and it's sad knowing what's about to happen. Obi-Wan even says goodbye, old friend, before leaving. Obi-Wan locates Grievous, and we have an interesting fight between the two. Grievous has his full lightsabers, but he's dealt with quickly. Yoda meanwhile travels to the Wookiee planet of Kashyyyk, in order to defend it from the Separatist droid attack. We see Chewbacca again, and yes, it's probably unnecessary to the story, but I liked it all the same. In one of my favourite scenes in the film, Palpatine shares the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Darth Plagueis was able to stop those he cared about from dying. Palpatine knows Anakin's fear, and is using it to draw him to the dark side. It's a great scene in this ominous theatre, and further establishes the doubt in Anakin's mind about the Jedi. Palpatine later tells Anakin that he knows the ways of the Force. Anakin works out that Palpatine is in fact the Sith Lord behind everything, and he wants to turn him in. He even goes to Master Windu and reports to him, but realising that Palpatine's death would mean the loss of knowledge about how to save those he loves from dying, he goes after Windu and tries to stop him. I love the overacting in this scene so much. I know it's not supposed to be funny, but I just love everything about it. Even Palpatine flying across the desk screaming, and whatever these little noises are. It's all 10 out of 10 acting, and I love every second of it. Mace Windu defeats Palpatine in a lightsaber battle. The fight is okay, but the CGI face is a little distracting. I know Ian McDiarmid probably couldn't do the fighting scenes at that point, but it's hard not to notice. Palpatine is disarmed. He uses Force Lightning, but it ricochets off the lightsaber, causing his disfigurement. Before Windu can kill him, Anakin cuts off his arm. Palpatine, suddenly back to full strength, fires Windu out the window.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Anakin then agrees to become Palpatine's apprentice, realising there's no way back now. He now becomes Darth Vader. Everything from this point on in the film is great, and it's some of the best of Star Wars. Palpatine issues Order 66. The clone troopers turn on their Jedi, and the Jedi are picked off one by one. John Williams' score in these scenes is excellent, and it really makes the scenes feel impactful. Anakin goes to the Jedi Temple to kill the remaining Jedi, and then to go to Mustafar to kill the Separatist leaders. Palpatine declares himself Emperor, turning the Galactic Republic into a galactic empire. He says that every Jedi is now an enemy of the Republic. Obi-Wan and Yoda survive, and they learn that Anakin has turned to the dark side. Obi-Wan goes to confront Anakin with Padme, while Yoda goes to confront Palpatine. Padme is heartbroken when she reaches Mustafar and learns what Anakin has done. I know this scene is serious, but this unintentionally makes me laugh when Obi-Wan appears at the ship's door, I mean, look at the way he's just standing there staring at Anakin, judging. Then we get one of the best fight scenes, not just in this trilogy, but out of all 6 of the films. I'm sure that's controversial, but I 100% think this is the best fight. As Battle of the Heroes plays, Obi-Wan and Anakin face off, master and apprentice, on a burning lava planet. They're so evenly matched that they can almost block and predict each other's every move. It really is great. As that is going on, Yoda faces Palpatine. This fight isn't as good, but it's still entertaining. Yoda leaves and decides to flee. Obi-Wan manages to defeat Anakin, and despite the questionable dialogue during the fight, the acting and writing at the end are some of the best. Anakin's legs are cut off, and he burns. Obi-Wan leaves and regroups with Yoda. The pair agree to go into exile. Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia. She dies as Anakin is recovered by Palpatine, alive. Anakin is put into the Vader suit. He asks where Padme is, and Palpatine tells him that in his anger, Anakin killed her. Leia is sent to Alderaan, and Luke is sent to Tatooine. The final scene on Tatooine, with the Force theme playing, is one of my favourites in the film, as the film comes full circle. I'm going to be honest, I love this film, and I don't understand the hate for it. I know people seem to like it more now, as my generation has grown up, but I've always liked the prequels. While 1 and 2 are average films, I still like them, and Revenge of the Sith is great. I could even be persuaded that it's the best Star Wars film. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Despite its sometimes wooden acting, the film is great, and has my favourite fight scene in any Star Wars film. It also has so many other great scenes, like the Darth Plagueis story, the Battle of Coruscant, and the scene where Vader rises with his suit on for the first time. Star Wars The Force Awakens is the last Star Wars film I've seen. I didn't like it when it came out, and I had no real interest in carrying on with Star Wars, so I haven't seen anything past this film, although I am on the internet, and I do watch other film YouTube channels, so I do have some idea about what happens after, but this is the last one I've seen. So after rewatching it, did I still not like the film?
I can't watch anymore.
Yep, I still didn't like it. Released in 2015, Star Wars The Force Awakens takes place 30 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. It was directed by J.J. Abrams and stars Daisy Ridley and John Boyega. Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill all return, although very briefly in Mark Hamill's case. The film is basically a remake of A New Hope. We have a new Death Star, or Starkiller base, this time bigger, and instead of destroying one planet, it can destroy multiple. We have another rescue mission, and we have the, well, not really mentor. Rey doesn't really have a mentor in this film, but let's just say the older character, dying in front of the protagonist. We have another masked villain, only this time, instead of an intimidating character, like Darth Vader, we have this angry guy, who loses his temper all the time.
How embarrassing.
We also have another protagonist from a desert planet, who wants adventure. Oh, and a new droid, but this time holding the location of Luke Skywalker, instead of the plans to the Death Star. It all feels very familiar, yet for some reason it doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. It's as though another sci-fi film is just wearing the Star Wars skin. Despite all the music, the sound effects, and returning characters, something feels like it's missing. And I think that has a lot to do with the story. There's nothing really to the story. There's no battle for redemption. They could have done that with Finn, but I think he left the First Order before he actually did anything. He did say it was his first mission, I think. I'm not really sure what Rey's journey was in this film. She sort of just went along with the plot. The film starts with another opening scene with a massive ship, just like A New Hope. The first line of the film is, "This will begin to make things right." Is that J.J. Abrams talking to the audience, after people disliked the prequels? Well, not my generation really, but people did dislike them. That line just feels weird to me. The location of Luke Skywalker is put into the droid, again like the Death Star plans, in A New Hope. And then the film introduces us to Kylo Ren. Now to look at him, you'd think he'd be a cool villain, but he isn't. They have this weird moment where Poe meets Kylo, and he starts cracking jokes and making Kylo look stupid.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first? It's just very hard to understand you with all the...
This is a terrible way to introduce your villain, if you want them to seem intimidating. I mean, can you imagine this happening in Darth Vader's first scene? This film does have a lot of weird humour, that I don't really like either. It just feels awkward. Poe is taken prisoner by Kylo Ren. A positive thing about the film is the CGI looks good. In the prequels it could go from looking great in one scene to looking awful in the next, but here it looks good. We're introduced to Finn, and I think he could have had a compelling story, with a stormtrooper choosing to join the Resistance. Well, are they really a Resistance? The film doesn't really do a good job about explaining the state of the galaxy in the film. There's the Republic, the First Order, and then the Resistance, but I'm not sure how they all fit together. There's also the Knights of Ren, and I don't really know who they are either. And if someone's going to say that it's explained in a comic or a book, it doesn't really matter. It needs to be explained in the film, so that filmgoers understand what's going on. The story with Finn was wasted really, and I would have liked to have seen it expanded, with a more classic redemption story that would fit nicely into Star Wars. We're then introduced to Rey. I know a lot of people don't like Rey, calling her a Mary Sue or whatever, and I get it. She's good at a lot of things straight away, and doesn't seem to have any real weaknesses, beyond caring too much. I don't think a character being naturally good at things makes or breaks their character, but it does need to be done carefully. I don't think the film really gets the balance quite right. She needs to be balanced with some kind of weakness, or serious adversity. I wouldn't say I dislike her character, but at the same time I didn't really connect to her, whereas Anakin and Luke went through much stronger trials, especially Anakin, which makes them feel more human. Rey is a scavenger, and lives alone on Jakku, another desert planet. I do like the use of practical effects in this film. It seems like they wanted to go back to more like the original trilogy with this, rather than the prequels. Rey meets BB-8, the droid carrying the location of Luke Skywalker. The story really starts as Poe helps Finn escape, and they crash land on Jakku. We then hear about Snoke, and I've heard what happens to him in the next film. In this film I did want to know more about him, but I was fine with him being left with some mystery, as I assumed that he'd be the villain of the trilogy. Finn and Rey escape in the Millennium Falcon. Upon Rey's escape, Kylo loses his temper again, and he just seems ridiculous. I can't help but compare him to Darth Vader and Darth Maul. I mean, can you imagine them doing that? It's not very intimidating, seeing someone lose it like that, especially compared to the eerie calm of the other two.
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral.
At last we will have revenge.
Han and Chewbacca return to the Millennium Falcon and meet Rey and Finn. I still can't believe that Luke, Leia and Han aren't on screen together. Isn't that crazy? Imagine another Lord of the Rings film, with Frodo, Gandalf and Aragorn in the film, but they never meet. Crazy. The writers also made Han go back to being a smuggler, and he's left Leia and lost his son. I get that they wanted to create some tension, and maybe it's more difficult to do that with someone with a great life, but you have to remember that these are someone else's characters. They need to be treated with extra caution for that reason, otherwise it can feel like you're vandalising someone else's work. I didn't like the decision to have Luke run off, and to split Leia and Han up. There's a lot of clumsy dialogue in this film, like the reveal that Han is Kylo's father.
In the hands of your father, Han Solo.
Why would he say it like that? A scene I do like is when Rey arrives on the green planet and sees it for the first time. I assume this is her first time seeing life outside Jakku, and I think it's a nice touch and shows more about her character. They then go to a bar, similar to the one on Mos Eisley in A New Hope, and we meet Maz. I'm not really sure what the purpose of her character is. She has Luke's lightsaber, for some reason, although it's not explained why. Luke uses it to call Rey, I think, but Rey refuses the call. This is a common trope in fiction, but it makes more sense when Luke did it, as he had to get back home. I'm not really sure why Rey runs off. Maybe she's overwhelmed by it all. We then find out about the new Death Star planet, or Starkiller Base as it's called, that can destroy multiple planets. The film is always trying to one-up A New Hope, which I don't think is necessary. You could do a smaller story that's more character-focused. Leia and Han meet. They've split up after Kylo Ren turned to the dark side. He'd been a pupil of Luke Skywalker. This caused Luke to leave and go into hiding. I didn't like what they did to Luke's character in this film. I feel like a Jedi wouldn't run away, especially Luke Skywalker. Rey is captured, and she somehow knows how to use a Jedi mind trick on the Stormtrooper. I'm not sure how. We get some more awful humour.
I'm in charge. I'm in charge now, Phasma. I'm in charge. Bring it.
The characters are reunited and plan to disable the shield. Yes, like in Return of the Jedi. So Poe can attack the Death Star planet. Han meets his son again, and Kylo kills him. I'm guessing Harrison Ford would only return if they killed off Han, but I still can't believe he didn't have a scene together with Luke and Leia. Rey witnesses the death, like Luke with Obi-Wan in A New Hope, but they have to flee. Kylo then meets Rey and Finn in the forest. Kylo is so weak. He's wounded by Finn, who has only just picked up a lightsaber. Then he's defeated by Rey in battle, and she's barely used a lightsaber either. I thought that Kylo was supposed to have been trained by Luke, yet he's so easily defeated. When Rey reunites with Leia, another weird thing happens. Leia hugs Rey, who she's only just met, instead of Chewbacca. He's just kind of off to the side. That's another weird decision, considering Leia and Chewbacca have known each other for such a long time. The film ends with R2-D2 waking up and giving Rey the location of Luke Skywalker. Rey goes to the island that Luke has hidden himself on, and the film ends with her holding out his lightsaber to him. And yes, I know what he does after that in the next film, though I still haven't watched it. So that's The Force Awakens. That was my first time re-watching it since it came out, and I still didn't like it. It doesn't feel like Star Wars, despite all the music and characters. I think the reason is down to the story. There really is something missing there. I mean, what's the message of the story? What did Rey learn? It feels like a bit of a mess, and a remake of A New Hope, without the heart of the film. The acting was okay, but the humour really takes me out of the film. Again, the CGI was good, and I like the use of practical effects, but that really can't make up for the poor story. Overall, I'm going to rate the film 4.5 out of 10. It's not average, it's worse than that, so it's got to be lower than a 5 for me. So I finally watched Rogue One, which is apparently the best of the Disney Star Wars films. I can see why people would say that, especially when I compare it to The Force Awakens, but to be honest, I wasn't overly impressed with the film. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. Released in 2016, and directed by Gareth Edwards, Rogue One stars Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso. It also stars Mads Mikkelsen, Diego Luna and Forest Whitaker. The film is set a week before the events of Star Wars A New Hope, and it follows the group of rebels who steal the schematics for the Death Star, as referenced in the opening crawl of A New Hope. The film does have a darker tone, which I liked, and it does take some bold decisions in regards to the characters. Jyn is the daughter of Galen Erso, played by Mads Mikkelsen. Galen is a research scientist, hiding from Imperial forces. The villain of the film, Orson Krennic, arrives to press Galen into service for the Empire, in order to complete his work on the Death Star. In the confrontation, Galen's wife is killed, and Jyn is sent into hiding. Visually, the film is great, and it looks a lot like the originals. There are some great shots, particularly on Scarif, where the final battle takes place. And I also like how they were able to blend CGI with practical effects. The main plot of the film follows Jyn join a group of rebels in order to steal the plans for the Death Star before its completion. Jyn starts as the loner character and ends up leading the rebels into battle, but her character's a little boring, to be honest. Her journey felt rushed, and despite seeing her backstory, I feel like we barely got to know her. One minute she's a jaded loner, the next she's leading the rebels into battle. At times she also feels like a passenger in her own film, and is dragged along by Diego Luna's character and the group of rebels. Also, I would have liked to have seen more from Mads Mikkelsen's character. He's a conflicted character, having been forced to work on creating a terrible weapon, and I really liked those aspects of the film, but they felt few and far between. I did like how they made him responsible for the Death Star's one weakness. That was quite interesting, and it also explains away the convenient plot device in A New Hope, where the Death Star has only one weakness. It did seem like a ridiculous oversight from the Empire that the entire Death Star can be destroyed with one shot in its weak spot, so explaining it as sabotage is actually an interesting addition. Diego Luna's character was interesting, and he seemed more of a conflicted character. I also liked Krennic, and he seemed a much more grounded villain compared to Kylo Ren, and there was a lot less screaming and shouting. Forrest Whitaker's character, on the other hand, felt a little bit underdeveloped, and I'm realising why I didn't like the film that much. It's got a lot to do with the characters. I love good characters. They can even make a poor story interesting, like in The Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. But in Rogue One, the characters we do see don't have much to them, and the more interesting grey characters, like Galen and Cassian, aren't shown as much. The film culminates in a battle on the planet Scarif, and this is another positive thing. I did like the end battle, for the most part, and it's nice to see a Star Wars battle with much better CGI. And we also have the Darth Vader corridor scene, which was great as well, where it's just him chopping guys down. The ending was also pretty bold as well, so I quite like the ending too. But I suppose it probably had to happen to tie in with the rest of the films. We also have a few cameos, some of which are better than others. As I've said, I like Darth Vader's appearance, but the CGI faces of Princess Leia and Grand Moff Tarkin were a little distracting. But overall the film was better than Force Awakens, and I liked Rogue One more, so of the 2 Disney Star Wars films I've seen, it's certainly the best one. But that isn't saying much. I feel like it had a lot of potential, and perhaps with a few changes, it could have been great. But it just felt like something was missing. It just didn't set the world alight, and I doubt I'll watch it again. But it wasn't awful either. So now for my rating. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. It's better than average, but nothing special. So, I finally watched it. So in case you haven't been watching my other videos, I've been rewatching Star Wars and reviewing them. I'd seen everything up to The Force Awakens, which I didn't like when it came out, so I stopped watching there. And last week I watched Rogue One for the first time, having heard that it was the best of the Disney Star Wars films. And to be honest, I wasn't really impressed. It was a very average film, and I'll link to the video if you want to go watch it after this, to hear my thoughts on it. So I went into this film a little apprehensive. I know it's massively polarising, with some people loving it and others absolutely hating it. It seems to be more of a critic versus audience thing, and sometimes I side with the critics, and sometimes I side with the audience, and other times I think they're both wrong. But with this, it seems like I'm on the side of the audience. I didn't like the film. I haven't liked any of the Disney Star Wars films so far, so I thought maybe I would like this, considering it's so different than the others. I knew roughly what it was about before I watched it. Like I knew Luke had become a hermit, and that he chucks the lightsaber, and I also knew about that scene. But there was actually a lot I didn't know, and despite not liking it, I'm still glad I watched it, and it is very different from what I was expecting. Just not in a good way. I didn't like the direction it's taken Star Wars. So let's start at the beginning, with the opening crawl. In my Force Awakens video, I criticised the film for being vague on the state of the galaxy, and that continues in this film. The Republic has been decimated, and the First Order reigns. Leia Organa's band of resistance fighters are the only ones standing against the First Order. Really? Did the Republic fall that quickly? And Leia's really the only resistance? It would have helped if we'd actually seen the Republic at some point, to establish what was actually lost. The film would have benefited greatly from showing us some other perspectives, so it'd give us a sense of scale, and to see the state of the galaxy. Was the Republic a force for good? Is it still based in Coruscant? Who leads the Republic? These are some pretty basic world building questions, but the film doesn't really answer any of them. But anyway, Snoke has taken over, and the First Order now reigns. Now who are the First Order and who is Snoke? Well, I've watched the film, and I still don't really know. Is he a Sith? He calls Kylo his apprentice, and uses the Force, but the film is unclear. He's also not called Darth Snoke either. The Resistance are waiting for Luke Skywalker to return, as if he's somehow going to bring down the First Order like he did with the Empire. The Resistance base has been found, and the First Order are speeding towards the base. Yes, just like in The Empire Strikes Back. And the Resistance have to escape. Poe Dameron flies towards the First Order, and he calls General Hux. Now maybe Hux could have been a good villain, but he was robbed of that chance, because we again have some terrible humour. I thought the cringeworthy humour in The Force Awakens was bad, but not only is it back, but it's worse than ever. I really couldn't believe this. Poe does a "your mother" joke to General Hux, and he pretends he can't hear him.
Okay, I'll hold.
Hello?
Hello? Yep, I'm still here. Tell him Leia has an urgent message for him about his mother.
Just ridiculous. Poe destroys the Dreadnought's surface cannons, and Leia calls him back, but he disobeys her orders. I thought this would actually be an interesting plot point, like on Star Trek, where there's tensions between a disobeying officer and the captain, but it really turns into something else, which we'll get to. Some bombers arrive to help Poe attack the Dreadnought. I guess they disobeyed Leia's orders as well, and they drop bombs onto the Dreadnought. Yes, drop bombs in space. I was very confused at that scene. How are the bombs dropping in space? The counterattack faces heavy losses, but it manages to destroy the First Order's Dreadnought. General Hux is then humiliated by Snoke in front of his crew. I really hated this. Why can't they have villains that are somewhat intimidating or dangerous? At least when Vader disciplined an officer, he killed them and replaced them with someone else. Humiliating Hux like that, who then has to command a whole legion of soldiers, undermines his authority, and it also makes him look ridiculous to the audience. The surviving members of the Resistance jump to hyperspace, but they are tracked by the First Order, who are using new technology. Now we come to my least favourite part of the film, Luke Skywalker. It picks up from where the last film left off, where Rey has arrived at his island and hands Luke his lightsaber. Now we'd already seen what happens next before. He chucks the lightsaber over his shoulder and walks off. He's given up on everything and is now an old hermit on an island. Back at his hut, we get one of the most unforgivable moments in the film. He asks where Han is, and the film cuts away before we see his reaction upon learning of his friend's death. It's ridiculous enough that there's no scene with Luke, Han and Leia reunited, and I assume there isn't one in the next one, given that Carrie Fisher died before that came out. But cutting away before we see his reaction was infuriating. It cuts to Snoke and Kylo Ren. Kylo's destroyed his mask in a rage. Yes, he rages out again. Back on the island we get this infamous scene, and it honestly feels like they're humiliating Luke on purpose. I mean, what is the purpose of that scene? Rey asks Luke to come and help fight the First Order, but he's given up and wants nothing to do with it. Yes, Luke Skywalker has given up. Poe, meanwhile, is demoted for disobeying orders. Snoke arrives through hyperspace and begins attacking the Resistance. The Resistance have only enough fuel for one jump through hyperspace, but the First Order can track them anyway. The First Order attack Leia's ship, and I thought this was the moment that Leia would die, due to Carrie Fisher's real-life death. But for some reason, Leia's able to survive in space, and she flies back into the ship like Superman. I don't even know what to say about that. I guess that's a new force power then, to be able to survive in space. The whole scene was really strange. Also, the film cuts away again, before we're able to see how they were able to bring her into the ship, without all the air getting sucked out. Leia is then in a coma, and her position is taken over by Vice Admiral Holdo. And what a strange character she is. First off, what's with the purple hair? Anyway, she's weird and passive-aggressive. When I think of a captain of a ship, the words passive-aggressive don't come to mind. Does the film want me to dislike her? I'm confused. Because at the end she's painted as a martyr, which also leaves the film with a confused message. Is Poe just supposed to trust her orders blindly, and not question authority? When Poe asks her what her plan is, she reminds him that he's been demoted, and the whole exchange is just bizarre. I mean, can you imagine Picard or Kirk acting like this? Unless it's in one of those episodes where they're playing the evil version of themselves. I get that she doesn't have to tell him her plans, as she's the leader, but surely if it's about to cause a mutiny, you'd say something. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, and I almost forgot. Admiral Akbar is dead, by the way. They just slipped that in there that he was killed. Then it's time to meet Rose Tico, whose sister was killed in the opening battle. Finn tells her about Snoke's ability to track them through hyperspace, and they come up with a plan to go aboard Snoke's ship and disable the tracking device. In order to do this, they have to go to a casino planet called Canto Bight and find a codebreaker. Meanwhile, back on the island, Luke gives Rey some lessons, after R2-D2 convinces him. Rey and Kylo start communicating via the Force, and it seems as though they have some sort of connection. We learn Luke contemplated killing Kylo, after he sensed a dark power coming from him, and this is another one of my least favourite parts of the film. Luke actually draws his lightsaber on Kylo, when Kylo is sleeping. This doesn't even feel like the same Luke from the originals. I get that it's 30 years later, but would he really murder his nephew while he was sleeping? Even if he only thought about it for a second? Well, he did raise his lightsaber to do it. He learned that Kylo had been corrupted by Snoke. I mean, couldn't he just have talked to him at least, before jumping straight to murder? I mean, maybe they did. It's all very vague. And that part of the film is barely fleshed out. You know, the part that might actually be interesting. And that reminds me, Yoda is also in the film. Why didn't he speak to Luke when Luke had given up? You could say that Luke closed himself off to the Force, which is why Yoda didn't appear. But surely Force ghosts operate independently of Luke. Rey is convinced that Kylo can be saved, so she goes off to try and turn him to the good side. Luke, meanwhile, appears to burn the Jedi library, with the help of Yoda, who brings down lightning. I feel like allowing Force ghosts to interact with the world also adds a whole new set of issues. Anyway, back to the casino planet, Canto Bight. This whole section feels pointless. I guess it's supposed to be a message about the rich and war profiteering, but surely all this existed during the time of the Republic. Why would any of the poor of this planet support the Resistance, who did nothing when they were empowered to help them? Finn and Rose are captured, and just so happen to meet another codebreaker in prison near them. Ugh. They escape and infiltrate Snoke's ship, but are captured by Captain Phasma. Oh yeah, she's alive for some reason. Kylo brings Rey to Snoke, and Snoke reads her mind, to learn where Luke is. Holdo, meanwhile, still isn't telling her plan to anyone for some reason, even to the point where Poe stages a mutiny. Leia wakes up and stuns him. It turns out Holdo was evacuating the Resistance to an unknown planet. I don't know how there are still unknown planets at this point, but anyway, she's using small transport ships that the First Order can't track for some reason. She then plans to go through hyperspace alone, so that the First Order follow her. Again, why couldn't she tell anyone about her plan? I have no idea. Perhaps if she had, it would have prevented an actual mutiny on board. But oh well. The codebreaker, DJ, overhears Poe telling Finn about the transport ships, and DJ then tells Hux. The First Order really need to get better generals. How can they not see the transport ships? I mean, aren't they only looking at one ship? I don't understand how a ship wouldn't be able to track them. Anyway, they begin firing on them, as the transport ships make their way to the salt planet of Crate. Holdo, now alone on the ship, hyperdrives into the First Order fleet, destroying all the ships. This opens another can of worms, as why has no one ever done this before? Why couldn't a robot hyperdrive into the Death Star, destroying it? Snoke orders Kylo to kill Rey, but Kylo instead kills Snoke. I'd heard this happened, so it wasn't really a shock to me. So Snoke was kind of a nothing character then. We barely know anything about him. He was just kind of pointless. Kylo offers Rey the chance to join him, so they can rule together, but she doesn't. He then takes over the First Order, I guess, and leads an assault on Crate. Oh, and Phasma dies again, and Finn and Rose escape to Crate too. But not before we get this awful line.
Let's go, Chrome Dome.
The survivors are in a fortress. The First Order just so happen to have a cannon on board that can be brought to the surface and fired at the fortress door. After spending all his time running, Finn has finally changed as a character. He's defeated his old boss, Captain Phasma, and he's ready to sacrifice himself to save the Resistance. But just before he does, Rose Tico flies into his ship, nearly killing them both, and knocking herself out. What? Before she is knocked out, she says, "That's how we're gonna win. Not by fighting what we hate, but saving what we love." Finn is robbed of his character arc. Then he just sits there awkwardly, as Rose kisses him for some reason. I still don't understand Rose's reasoning. As far as she's aware, before she's knocked out, the First Order are about to breach the fortress door and kill all of the Resistance. A second later, the cannon does destroy the fortress door. Finn then drags Rose all the way back to the fortress, somehow without getting shot. Luke then appears, in the form of some kind of force projection, in order to distract Kylo Ren and buy time for the Resistance to escape. He speaks to Leia, but he doesn't mention any of his plan to her, for some reason. The effort of force projection kills him, so he sacrifices himself to save those he loves. So is sacrifice good or bad then? And that's it. The death of Luke Skywalker. He gave up and lived as an old hermit, then projected himself to buy the Resistance some time, and died. And that's it. Leia and Rey sense Luke's death. Rey then says the Resistance can rise again. The final scene is back on Canto Bight, where we see one of the children wearing a ring of the Resistance. Again, why would they like the Resistance, given that the casino planet most likely operated during the time of the Republic, who did nothing to help them? And that's it. That's The Last Jedi. I finally watched it. I didn't like the direction it went, and it's full of plot holes and questionable decisions. I finally see why it's so divisive. Yet I do understand why some people like it. The Force Awakens and Rogue One were so predictable, and there wasn't really much to them. So I get that this, with its constant twists, will be entertaining for some people, particularly critics, who have to watch so many films. But it's really not for me. I didn't like the direction it's taken Star Wars, although that really started with The Force Awakens. The characters also seem to get lost in the film. I mean, what was the point of Finn's story? Or even Poe and Rey? And what even is the message of the film? Blindly trust authority? Don't sacrifice yourself to save people? Or actually do sacrifice yourself? There was also no resolution about Han's death. That was just kind of forgotten about. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. I didn't like it. So now for my rating. I'm going to have to rate it a 3 out of 10, especially for what they did to Luke. I've finally seen Solo, A Star Wars Story, and it was another very average film. There were aspects I liked, but overall it's very forgettable, and a pretty pointless film. I'm not sure who was asking for a Han Solo origin story, but we have it I guess. It stars Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo, and takes place roughly 10 years before Star Wars A New Hope. Now Alden Ehrenreich does an alright job as Han. I mean, he's not Harrison Ford, but I don't think he's trying to replicate Harrison Ford either. He's kind of put his own spin on it, and he's okay as Han, but nothing special. We see Han start off as an orphan on Corellia with a woman named Kira, played by Emilia Clarke. Together they steal some coaxium, which is a starship fuel, and attempt to escape by bribing an Imperial officer. Kira is captured before she can leave, and Han vows to return and rescue her. Also, we see how Han is given the surname Solo. It's because he's bald and alone, and had no surname, so this guy at the desk just gives him the name Solo. I'm not really sure what to think about that. But anyway, he joins the Imperial Navy. The story then skips ahead 3 years. Han is now an infantryman, as he was expelled from the Imperial Flight Academy. Some criminals are posing as Imperial soldiers, and Han attempts to join them. He tries to blackmail their leader, Tobias Beckett, but Beckett throws him into a pit. It's here in the pit that Han meets Chewbacca, and this is pretty cool. It was nice to see how they met, even if it didn't really add anything. They escape and Beckett seems impressed with them, and he enlists them both in order to steal some more coaxium. The plan fails. Beckett was stealing for a man named Voss, a member of the Crimson Dawn, a crime syndicate. Han and Chewbacca agree to help Beckett get some more coaxium, to stop Voss killing him. When they meet Voss, they discover that Kira is working for Voss. He insists that she go with them. So far as you can see, there isn't really much special to the story. It's all pretty basic, and we don't really learn all that much about Han that we didn't already assume. Kira then leads Han to Lando Calrissian, played by Donald Glover, and he's alright as Lando, but he doesn't really add much. Han wages for the Millennium Falcon, but Lando cheats to win. Afterwards, Lando agrees to help them in exchange for a share of the profits. Something I do like about the film is there's a lot of double crossing and characters betraying each other for money, and that part of the film is quite interesting, as we get to see the more criminal side of Star Wars. But overall the film isn't anything special. We see them go on their mission to Kessel, and after that they steal the coaxium. We see Han make the Kessel Run, which is what Han referenced in Star Wars A New Hope. The film culminates back with Voss, who is eventually defeated. The ending shows that Voss's superior is Darth Maul, so I guess he survived then. I mean, I liked his character, he was pretty cool, but I have no idea how he survived. Han at the end wins the Millennium Falcon from Lando, after Han steals the hidden card Lando uses to cheat. I did like these moments, as they felt more like Han from the originals. However, overall the film is very average, and I doubt I'd watch it again. The film also flopped at the box office, with a budget of up to $330 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made at the time. Allegedly it would need to make $500 million to break even, but it only managed $392 million. The effects were good, and the performances were generally good too. It's just the story was nothing special, and the whole thing feels kind of pointless, and I'm not sure who actually asked for this film. The anthology films were put on hold after this film's release, and we haven't seen any since. I'd give the film a 4 out of 10. It wasn't as good as Rogue One, which I thought was average itself, but it wasn't that bad either.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
You serious?
I finally watched Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and first off, it's better than The Last Jedi, but not by much. The film is a mess. In fact, the whole sequel trilogy is a mess, and in this film it felt as though they were trying to correct The Last Jedi in many ways.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker takes place 1 year after The Last Jedi. In the opening crawl we find out the dead speak, and that Palpatine is back.
Oh, come on!
Yes, that is how we find out. Now of course I already knew he was back, and I think it was even in the trailers. And the whole thing felt as though it was just because they didn't know what to do, after Rian Johnson had Snoke killed in The Last Jedi. There's a mysterious broadcast from Palpatine, as he announces his return for some reason. Leia dispatches secret agents to investigate. Meanwhile Rey is training for some reason. I'm not sure why, as she's already beaten Kylo easily. Kylo meanwhile rages again. Yes, it's even in the opening crawl, as he is in search for the Emperor. So that's the setup of the opening crawl. We see Kylo Ren uses a wayfinder to lead him to the Sith planet of Exegol. He meets Palpatine, and learns Palpatine was behind everything.
Liar!
Yeah, I don't buy it. It definitely seems like J.J. Abrams was panicking after the death of Snoke, and had to find a villain for the film to tie the trilogy together. I still can't believe there was no plan for the trilogy. I mean, how could Disney allow that to happen? How did Disney allow Rian Johnson to just undo what J.J. Abrams had set up? Not that I liked what J.J. Abrams had set up. As I've said, I wasn't a fan of The Force Awakens when it came out, and it was where I stopped watching. But how could Disney allow that to happen, with all the money involved? Anyway, Palpatine is revealed to be behind everything, and also has a fleet of Star Destroyers that he brings out of the ground. Who's piloting these ships? How are they underground? Why is he revealing himself only now? Why didn't he reveal himself in the first place instead of using Snoke? Kylo reforges his mask, undoing what he did in The Last Jedi. Palpatine tells Kylo to kill Rey. Rey meanwhile is training under Leia Organa. Again, why does Rey even need to train at this point? Poe Dameron and Finn reveal that Palpatine is back, in some questionable dialogue.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Now I'd seen this already as it became a bit of a meme. We then see Finn, Rey and Poe together, the three main characters of the sequel trilogy, and it had me thinking, have these three even met before? Poe and Finn reveal there's a spy in the First Order, and Palpatine is on Exegol. Rey learns from Luke's notes that they need a wayfinder to find Exegol, and that's a running theme of the film. There's a lot of MacGuffins in this film. So a MacGuffin, in case anyone doesn't know, is an object or device that merely serves as a trigger for the plot. It's not necessarily bad, but as we can see in this film, they're handled pretty poorly. Rey, Finn and Poe set off to the desert planet of Pasaana in search of a clue to the Wayfinder's location. Kylo Ren murders one of his men for asking questions. They really never learned with this character. He's still losing his temper, and is just killing his men for asking questions. On Pasaana, Rey and Kylo again have some kind of Force connection, and Kylo learns of her location. He travels there with some of his men. Oh yeah, and Lando's in this film for some reason, as he helps Rey and the others escape. We get this awful line as they escape.
They fly now!
They fly now?
They fly now!
They find a dagger, which helps them find the Wayfinder, which will help them find Exegol, where Palpatine is. The only problem is the inscription is written in a Sith language that C-3PO is not allowed to translate. They then escape to another planet, and Babu Frick, yes that is his name, helps them extract the memory from C-3PO. But it wipes his memory. He says goodbye to his friends. I mean, are they his friends? Doesn't he barely know most of them? Anyway, his mind is wiped, but Rey learns the location of the Wayfinder. Again, how all this works I have no idea. Rey and Kylo duel, where Kylo reveals that Rey's grandfather is Palpatine. They really didn't have a plan for the sequel trilogy, did they? General Hux turns out to be a spy and helps the group escape, before he is executed. This film is such a mess. They then fly to the Wayfinder's coordinates, to a moon in the Endor system. Rey uses the dagger on the wreckage of the second Death Star to find the Wayfinder's location. I mean, how does that even work? We get some more of this. Leia is dying, and in a final act, she distracts Kylo. Rey stabs him with her lightsaber, but feels guilty. Then Leia dies. So that's all three main characters of the original trilogy gone, and they were never on screen together. Rey feels guilty and heals Kylo. She leaves and exiles herself. Then there's actually a nice scene which I liked, with Han Solo and Kylo. Kylo reclaims his identity as Ben Solo. Luke's spirit speaks to Rey, and encourages her to face Palpatine. He gives her Leia's lightsaber. Palpatine deploys his fleet, and in a funny line, well, not intentionally funny, but we learn that the Holdo maneuver has a 1 in a million chance to work, which kind of undoes The Last Jedi. And what exactly does it say about Holdo? Rey goes to Exegol to confront Palpatine, at the Sith throne. She transmits her location so the others can follow her. Kylo also joins her, but now as Ben Solo. Palpatine incapacitates them, and absorbs their power, to rejuvenate himself. Rey hears voices from the Jedi of the past, and fights Palpatine, deflecting his Force lightning, killing him. But she also seems to die in the process. Kylo then heals her, sacrificing himself to save her. Lando and the others also battle the Star Destroyers and defeat them. The people across the galaxy rise against the First Order, and I like this part of the film, as we actually got to see a little more of the galaxy. After the Resistance's victory, Rey visits Tatooine. She sees the Force ghosts of Leia and Luke, and when an old woman asks her what her name is, she says Rey Skywalker, and the film ends. I'm not sure about that one. And that's it, that's the end of the trilogy. This film is a mess, and so is the entire sequel trilogy. I mean, what was the purpose of Finn and Poe in the story? And what even were their arcs in the trilogy? They kind of disappear in the film, and we barely see the three of them together. I can't believe Disney didn't have a plan for the trilogy, and Luke, Han and Leia are never seen on screen together in the sequel trilogy. Anyway, I've had enough of talking about the sequels for now. I'm going to rate this film a 4 out of 10. So that's my review of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. I'm Firelink Frontier, and if you've enjoyed this video and would like to support the channel, please like and subscribe.